we were looking at sample responses that candidates had written to exam papers. So I'd like to continue on from that idea. Let me share my screen with you. Okay, here we go. Right, so, and welcome to those who have just joined. We are going to continue on. We're going to look at this in the next few weeks. We're going to be looking at example candidate responses. And this is quite a nice booklet that you can find online for yourselves. And in last week, we looked at commentaries, which is always your question 1A and any other A question that you choose to answer in the exam paper. But today, I want to look at the B questions, which is all about the directed writing. So it's not commentary today, it's the directed writing that we're going to look at. Okay, so you will have to bear with me as I read through the text so that we can then look at a good response to question B, a medium response, and then a weak response, so that you get a better idea of the kinds of things that examiners are looking for when they mark your paper. Okay, now I've put the chat box on the side, so if at any point you want to stop me and ask a question as I work through the text, please feel free to do so. And I will also be asking you questions to think about that you can type your answers to in the chat box. Okay, so in today's sample candidate response, I want to look at question 3. Okay, remember, when you get the question, you have got to read it closely and you write your answer to it, and then when you finish writing your answer, you go back and you read the question. Make sure you have answered the question. Pay attention to detail. Okay. Right, so let me have a read through this. The following text is taken from an article which describes the writer's experience of returning to her home country of Liberia, West Africa. Okay, and there have been civil wars and upheaval in Liberia. So it's good if you have a bit of general knowledge. It doesn't matter if you don't, but it's good to read widely about the world and to be aware of these kinds of things. Okay, so we've got to keep in mind that when we read this article, it's somebody who is returning home to a country of Liberia in West Africa. So you would have worked through part A, you would have commented on the ways in which language and style are used to convey the writer's thoughts and feelings. But now, after you had done that and you had dissected the extract, you looked at the language, now you'd have to replicate the kind of tone and voice and similar ideas to what is being expressed in the extract. Okay, so let's have a read of the question. Basing your answer closely on the style and features of the original extract, continue the account, and they give you a word length. Stick to that. Don't go over it. If you really have to go over, try not to go over by more than around about 10 words maximum. I would even say 5, okay? So stick to that limit. You do not need to bring the account to a close. You don't have to end it in some way. It could be open to continuation, in other words. So what is great is with these questions, because you've already done the analysis of what the author says and how they say it, it makes it easier for you to continue to pretend that you are this writer and you are carrying on the extract. So in other words, you just have to sound like this person and convey similar ideas to what has been expressed in the extract, okay? Don't blatantly copy everything they've said beforehand. Try and rework it, but in a way that it sounds like them continuing, okay? So remember, you're going to read through the extract twice. Obviously, for purposes of this live lesson, I can only read through it once, and then we'll look at the samples, the candidates' examples, okay? Right, here we go. Every day of those 2 weeks in Ghana, my soul ached to be home in Liberia. The ocean behind my room at the Afire Beach Hotel in Accra teased me with its flapping and rolling all day and night. But this was not yet home, I told myself. I wanted to see Liberia again, where not only the ocean waves had survived a bloody war, where the sunshine also reigned, a home of lost ghosts and falling rockets, of runaways like us, who had already been forgotten by the stay-at-home survivors, a home of lost youths wandering the streets after their survival of one of the world's bloodiest wars, a home of tears and unimaginable stories of cruelty. I wanted to hug my father again, to see him in his old age, his gray hair that had defied death and time, to see my brothers again after the lost years of their youth, the war having sapped opportunities away from them. They were the younger ones, the ones that had not yet died in all of the after-war diseases and calamity. I wanted to cry and laugh with them, survivors who still needed answers. Today, I was on a Kenyan airliner. The plane was filled with others who had been away too long. They had also been forgotten. Sitting next to me was a young woman looking younger than a teenager. Her light brown skin sparkled with beauty. She seemed a bean too. Okay, and what is a bean too? Well, it's a well-traveled person. She seemed a bean too, with a soft face made up to the letter, her smile prepared. On her fingers were gold and diamond rings, bracelets and fine linens draped around her arms as if she were some queen from a past world. She had ordered a huge perfume case from the airline's duty-free catalog, so the stewardess came looking for her. She pushed her hands from under the hijab veil to receive the package from the beautiful Kenyan stewardess. She quickly opened the package to show it off to me. Pride took over her features as she examined the perfume, smiling at me. We were not yet introduced. She was only 22, I would learn, and her English, simple and rough, very much in contrast to her appearance. She had not gone to school all these years, I thought to myself, yet she looked schooled and well kept. She quickly excused her attire. She was flying in from a far-away country in the Middle East. I am a real Liberian girl, she smiled. She was coming in from Saudi Arabia, where she had stationed herself comfortably with an Italian man. Her conversation was not brief. She pulled her hands out of her chiffon-laced hijab and other wraps every few minutes to speak with her hands, even though I could understand Liberian English perfectly. She lived an arrangement, she said softly. The man was old, much older, but he took good care of her and her family. He was old enough to be her grandfather, she smiled, but that was okay. There was room, she said, for him to do what he wanted, and room for her too to move around in their arrangement. Here she was, she told me, flying back and forth whenever she wanted. She'd been everywhere, she said, everywhere in the Middle East and Africa. She was on her way to see her mother in Liberia, to give them gifts, to take care of those who had survived the years. With his money lavished on her, he could come twice a month if she wanted. She smiled, looking into my eyes as if for approval. I turned away to the window. I was in the window seat. I love window seats. Because of invitations to read and present my poetry, I am a frequent flyer around the US, and now, though less frequently, outside the US. I had taken to window seats over the last few years. They are my solace when I end up next to an annoying passenger, or a sweet little Liberian girl who had chosen the soft road through the rocky desert the war had set her on. I wanted to jump through that window today. I was angry, not at the girl, her mother, or her man. I was angry at the world, at the war, and at those who had brought this sort of calamity upon us. I was angry that such a beautiful, soft-skinned girl, looking like my own daughter, had given herself away to an old man because of the times, had sold herself into slavery. I kept looking through the window. I could not look at her now. I told myself. I turned away from the window and took her in my arms. She could have been my daughter, I thought. She held on tightly to me, tears rolling down her cheeks as I too wept. Okay, so it's quite a poignant, it's quite a moving extract, isn't it? So they will give you a glossary of terms that you can look up if you're not sure. Let's just read, now we've read through the extract, let's read the question one more time. What would you have to do? You would have to, basing your answer closely on the style and features of the original extract, continue the account. Okay, you continue the account, you do not need to bring the account to a close. Okay, so you've got to pretend you're this writer and you're going to continue on from where the writer has left off. Okay, so let's have a look at the first sample response. And sometimes I struggle with the handwriting, so please bear with me as I try to work it out. Okay. The plane landed and we parted ways. Okay, sorry, I'm just gonna interrupt here. This student got a grade A. A grade A, so keep that in mind as I read through this directed writing piece. The plane landed and we parted ways. I never saw that girl again, but I had seen myself in her actions. Those were hard times. I should not have judged her for taking the soft road. I had myself, to some extent. I boarded a train which would take me to my family. Life had begun to spring out of death in the land I crossed. In every town we crossed, I felt that no one recognized me. To make issues worse, my lack of practice with the language made me feel as if I was a foreigner, or that I had been forgotten. I hoped my family would remember, yet for some reason I had doubt. Maybe they would treat me like I had treated that girl. Soon, however, the waves near the railway line soothed me with their rhythmic motion. They had not forgotten me, even if others had. Okay, an interesting directed writing piece, quite poignant in itself. Let's have a look at what the examiner liked. Okay, what did the examiner like about this? And look, this is amazing. This person got 10 out of 10. Yes, it is possible to get full marks, okay? The examiner liked it because of the following. This response achieves an almost seamless continuation of the original passage. And I agree with that. I do feel like that voice is continued, that sort of sentimental, nostalgic voice. It's continued, isn't it? The material of the passage is subtly used to create a sense of doubt and possible alienation in the writing, right? Because at the end, the speaker expresses doubt. Interestingly, the candidate chooses to ignore the relatively optimistic final section of the passage where they hug, concentrating instead on the forebodings and uncertainties expressed in the opening paragraphs. They went back to the opening and they reworked that, or they incorporated that feeling into this particular part. The introspective, the inward-looking, and self-accusing tone of the original is exactly caught in sentences such as, I shouldn't have judged her for taking the soft road. I had myself to some extent. Okay, it's kind of self-accusatory, and if you read through the extract again, you'll see the evidence of that. The candidate also achieves a moment of real fluency in describing how life had begun to spring out of death in the land I crossed. The conclusion of the response, in which the narrator has only the mocking ocean as a companion, is a clever and poignant moving extension of the original, where the writer expresses that they miss the Liberian Ocean. They're almost taunted by the ocean in Ghana because it reminds them so much of the Liberian Ocean. And at least there is some comfort in the fact that the ocean at least is comforting her. Okay, there's some sort of personification going on there. But that is why the examiner liked this directed writing style. And I wouldn't say that it was that complicated. I don't know what your impression is, but I don't think it's too complicated. There are 3 sections, they're well developed, they've brought in some ideas from other parts of the extract, they've expressed themselves in similar ways, they've pulled on some of the specific ideas, and then they've continued it, making the story their own, showing the doubts that are haunting them at this point in the journey. Okay, so it's very cleverly done. All right, now let's look at a and you can, for yourself, if you look at the marking schemes, you'll see what it means to get 10 out of 10. Okay, let's just read the second part quickly. Responses at the top of this band will be persuasive and confident, supported by a consistent and at best personal engagement with context and purpose, using fluent and accurate expression, accompanied by a strong sense of audience. So they kept that writer's tone going. Now, let's look at a grade C, or sort of a medium type of response. What did they write as part of their directed writing piece? Let's just move it up a bit. An annoying passenger. Okay, sorry. Is this where it starts? Yes, it does. Oh no, here it is. Okay, sorry. The girl, remember the extract ends where they hug, right? They hug each other. The girl, old enough to be my child, quickly shrugs me off, her tears coming to a quick halt as her face locates its proud expression once more, and rightfully so. She had been lost, just as the rest of had been, and she too had survived the bloody war of our country. Already I have a few issues with this, simply because I feel that they've had this really emotional bond where the girl's clinging to her and crying. Do you think she would then just simply shrug her off? I find that unlikely. Also, I think there's something wrong here. She had been lost just as the rest of us had been. So remember, read through your writing when you write so that it makes sense, okay? You want it to make sense to your reader. So I find it a bit questionable, but okay, perhaps this student is playing on that idea of she's proud, she's well off. So maybe that's the kind of character trait she wants to focus on. I turned away again as she returned to smelling her perfume. I closed my eyes and pictured my father and brother's smiling faces. Tears began to pour down my cheeks. I was going home. We were all going home. The war was finally over. So what's quite nice is I think there's a sentimental tone here, which is conveyed strongly in that original extract, which was great. She does make reference to her father and her brother in the extract and to smiles. So that is conveyed as well. So I do feel that this particular paragraph carried that off a bit better than the first one, which seemed a bit more unlikely, in my opinion. Now, that is all the student has written, and it does fall short of the word limit. Okay. So let's see what the examiner liked and what the examiner didn't like. They were given a 6 out of 10. Okay. Interestingly, the candidate chooses to adopt the present tense for the opening paragraph of the response, and this certainly conveys some immediacy to the situation. So they like that it was present tense. There is also a refusal on the part of the candidate to continue and develop the emotional tableau, the emotional picture or painting or still, which concludes the passage. Remember, there was this big build-up to an emotional hug at the end of the original passage, and the student chose not to continue that. The Liberian girl recovers her sense of importance, and the writer returns to her thoughts about her family. So there is some sort of continuation, you could argue. Both the style and tone of the original are quite well understood, and there is a pleasing realism and matter-of-factness in the approach. However, the candidate might have usefully expanded the situation before coming even close to the lower end of the word boundary. So in other words, a little bit more development would have helped and would have given just a bit more meaning to that very short, abrupt, directed writing piece. So I know you will be restricted to time, but this is why you're going to practice and practice and practice past papers so that the time limit doesn't become this huge issue for you when you're stuck in the exam situation. All right, now you can read what it means to get 6 out of 10, okay? You can read that for yourselves if you look up the marking scheme. Okay, now let's look at what a grade E student got. And I'm sorry, we've got 8 minutes left, so I'm just rushing a little bit. What did a grade E student get? I will try not to falter on the handwriting here when I'm reading that out. She looked at me with a helpless look and told me about how she missed the old Liberia, the times when she had freedom to do what she wanted, the times when her dad would tell her stories, the times when her brother would fool around with her. Okay, I have to say, be careful, because the idiom fool around can have a few meanings. Yes, maybe it just means to be playful, but there could be sexual connotations. So that doesn't sound very positive. Be careful of how you use idiomatic expressions, common expressions. Use them correctly. I again looked towards the window as the tears of anger kept rolling. So now she's angry. I started hating the world for choosing, there's a spelling error here, Liberia, out of all the countries to go through these events. I started hating the world for choosing Liberia. Did the world choose Liberia? I know she's trying to sound poetic here, but it doesn't quite come across that way. It sounds a bit awkward or unusual or strange. Let's have a look here. All I could say was that it was going to be all right. Looking out of the window, I imagined going back to the past and seeing all the smiles on people's faces. There's a nice continuation of that idea of smiling. I imagined the freedom they had. I imagined the family being complete. And I imagined her, the girl, next to me, smiling. Okay, so let's have a look at this. And forgive me, I have to cough. Right, let's have a look at this. This is what the marker the examiner gave her, a 5 out of 10. Let's have a look at the response. The directed writing response makes a confident venture into the subject matter of the original. In addition, the candidate picks up aspects of the original style and tone and makes a reasonable continuation. The window gazing of the writer is neatly used to represent a gateway to the imagination, in which all the conflicts of the passage are resolved. So that was clever. The candidate has made quite an assured version of the style and tone of the original, and this is a more confident and effective answer than the commentary response, whatever commentary they gave, which was 4 out of 15. So how strange, isn't it strange that the examiner says a lot of positive things here, hardly anything negative at all, actually, but overall awards 5 out of 10. Perhaps because the answer isn't that inspiring. It's quite a plain answer. There's a bit of awkward expression. There's nothing too, I don't want to say inspirational about it, but it's just quite a plain answer, isn't it? It's not bad. They stuck to the word limit. It's not full of faults, but perhaps ideas could have been expanded or developed or expressed better in a more sentimental or nostalgic way instead of just a plain direct way. So this examiner was quite strict. And the reason the student got 5 out of 10 was because this was an adequate attempt. Okay, it was adequate, but marked by an inconsistent and uneven sense of purpose, context, and style. So in other words, there was something uneven about it, jumping perhaps from one idea to another without really going anywhere in particular. Okay, generally there was sound expression and accuracy. All right, so it all just depends on your marker. And I do think that sometimes if you have not spent enough time, or not spent enough time because you're limited for time, but if you have not done well enough in the commentary, your marker will probably not have quite high expectations of you. They won't have high expectations of you to do well in your directed writing, which is not to say that you couldn't. But I do think there might be a link between how you come across in your commentary and what you do then in your directed writing. So in other words, if you point out something in your directed writing about the language and style of the extract, if you say that it is sentimental and that it reflects on family ties, make sure that your directed writing piece is sentimental and reflects on family ties, okay? whatever you examine in your commentary, try to bring it across in your directed writing. Okay? Now, what I also wanted to look at was the marking scheme. And sorry, I wasn't sure how much time we were going to have, so I rushed through this bit, but I think let's just go back to that second one, the candidate that got a C, who probably could have gotten much higher if they had simply developed that very short extract a bit more, just one more short paragraph of ideas. And the reason they got 6 was because they had provided a clear and informed sense of purpose, context and relevance supported by a reasonable attempt to use language appropriate for the task. So it really is a kind of a mid-range answer. And you'll note that, an examiner can choose to give you generally 2 marks in a mark band, 6 or 7. And that will indicate whether you've done this well or not as well as it could have been. All right, does that make sense? Hopefully it does. And if you were to go up to the mark scheme, you'll see that the different kinds of bands that you get should help you understand. And I try to include this when I mark your works. When I mark your assignments, I try to put a band there to show you how it falls into that band. The different bands show you the kinds of things you're getting right, and they should suggest to you the kind of things you're not doing. So if you want to aim for this mark, which is where I'd really love you to be aiming, okay? You would be giving a perceptive recognition of context, audience, and purpose, okay? CAP, context, the audience, and the purpose, and you will find these concepts explored in the opening unit of your textbooks. Okay, so you recognize that, and the examiner recognizes that you recognize it, okay? Context, audience, and purpose supported, that is, quotes, evidence, by a good range of appropriate vocabulary and expression suitable for the task. So show the examiner that you are widely read. Show them that you know how to use literary terms, metaphors, similes, personification. Use them as well in your directed writing. If somebody uses personification, like the ocean tried to console me with its waving motion, try and echo something like that in your directed writing, so they see that, you've spotted the personification, and not only that, you've used something similar in your directed writing. All right, we've come to the end of the live lesson. Thank you so much for joining me.